Yes, but if you could just wait and I'll introduce
I'm
you.
waiting.
Thank you.
I'm just.
Okay, so there's still people coming on, but I think we might as well just get started. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight on Erev Hashoah. My name is Nira Berry, and this really means a lot to me. And in the merit of the 6 million who were murdered in the Holocaust and the survivors who suffered in terror, including my parents, Sheila Bernard and Eric Eli Edens, Aleva Shalom, I'm honored to chair Beth Shalom's 15th annual Shoah Holocaust commemorative program tonight on Erev Yom HaShoah. I thank our participants, and I thank Rabbi Cooper has done so much, and Rabbi Antine for their much needed assistance. And I want to thank world-renowned cantor Jeffrey Nadel for sharing his beautiful voice and talent that you will see. And thank you in advance to our honored keynote speaker, Holocaust survivor Halina Peabody, who will hear speak in a few minutes. I want to also thank our sponsors, Frida and Jeffrey Pascal, Vera Menachem Katz, Debbie Snyder and Giorgio Culp, Albert and Marcel Gary, Susan and Isaac Abraham, Bashi and Roger Packer, Margaret Claff, and Bruce and Marion Triner. And they're also listed in the chat. And I thank you all for being here for such an important evening and event and participating tonight. So I just want to say that the Shoah is among the most tragic of Jewish catastrophes. We believe the Shoah must never become a historical footnote, but always be respectfully remembered by all. Each year, including this one, our theme is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The key objectives of the program are to honor the memory of the more than 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust, and to provide Holocaust education and encourage each of us to provide support and protection for all Jews wherever they may live, as well as to combat anti-Semitism. In the past, we've been privileged to present a wide variety of programs, including chief rabbis and dignitaries, such as the chief rabbis of Poland, Romania, and Hungary, and many ambassadors to the US from countries where the Holocaust took place, a Jewish Hungarian community activist, and we also had a son of a Nazi officer. And most importantly, we have been honored with many Holocaust survivors, such as the one we have tonight. So tonight, we are going to first begin with our Holocaust speaker, Halina Peabody. And her personal Holocaust testimony will be followed by our participatory Holocaust commemorative ceremony. And we will welcome second and third and fourth generations after to participate with us. And we are honored to have 4 generations from one Holocaust survivor, Lisa Murick, who's going to lead the legacy readings. And at the end of the program, we'll take a few minutes for question and answer. And you can also put questions in the Zoom chat as we go along as well, where you'll have the opportunity to ask Halina any questions you may have. We feel it is so important to hear survivors tell their stories, especially tonight on Erev Yom HaShoah. We are truly honored to have Halina Peabody as our speaker tonight. Halina was a treasured friend of my mother's, and I've known her for many years. So this is very, very meaningful and special for me. Halina's story is very interesting, and starting from when she was 9 years old, when the Nazis threatened her and her family's life. So I thank you, Halina, for being here tonight, and please go ahead and you can start telling your story.
Okay. I was born in Krakow in Poland in 1932, December 32. And then my parents decided to move to a little place called Zaleszczyki, which was all the way down near the Romanian border. My father was a beginning dentist, and so we were sort of a new young family. So we moved down to Zaleszczyki, and I know that there were some visits. I was very young, so I don't remember much before the war, but there were the visits from my grandparents, I know, and my aunts. I had 2 aunts in Krakow. And when they came to visit, we had a couple of pictures which I donated to the museum, and I think you have some of them there. that I gave you. Um, my mother was a champion swimmer, and she was very happy because this place had a river and she could at least water ski. And we had a nice little boat, which we went from one, there were two beaches. One was sunny beach and a shady beach. So life was very nice for me. At 6.5, my mother was a great sports person, so she taught me to skate when I was 5. My father decided to teach me to read before I went to kindergarten because I was the first one. And it was a very, very pleasant life as I remember it. I had bicycles and tricycles, anything you can think of. So in 1939, September 1939, the war started and everything changed immediately. First of all, I never made the kindergarten, of course. The Russians were going to occupy our part of Poland, and mostly people were terrified of the Russians, because especially the men, because they liked to take the men and conscript them into the army, which meant like being in prison for 20 years. So my father was very concerned about that. My mother had just come from Krakow after she gave birth to my little sister. She was 2 months old. And they decided, at least my father decided, that he would go over to Romania. Some people just grabbed whatever they could and rushed to Romania. They knew Romania was not going to be occupied. Yes, there is the map of it. You see the river Dniester, and that was, you can swim and you can boat halfway through, and it was a natural frontier. So my father decided to go by himself, leaving us, and the Russians came. Um, and then after they settled in and they put in all kinds of demands, gold, silver, like usually the occupation forces do. And then my father and some other people who rushed over to Romania so quickly decided that maybe they could cross back over quietly just to sort of see if they could just blend in the family and just get away with it. And the river was all frozen because the weather was very, very cold in the winter, and they would skate on the river. And so they all tried to kind of cross back quietly. Unfortunately, the Russians had sealed the border, and they caught all of them and put them in prison. And in my father's case, they said he was a spy. They gave him 20 years hard labor and sent him off to Siberia. And me, and I mean, not me and my father and my mother and my sister, we were considered the family of a criminal because he was given 20 years. So we were thrown out of our house. And we were told to go to a place called Worcester, which was just up the road, maybe half an hour by horse. We did have trains, but usually I would say that was by horse cart, but half an hour. So we were thrown out, and my mother had to manage with the two of us. We, of course, had no knowledge of what happened to my father. It was very, very, everybody was very worried. But we had no choice. We had to just make a living. The Russians were not too harsh on us, apart from throwing us out of our house. I know that they made me go to school, but they put all of us everyone went down one class. So since I was going to kindergarten, there was a pre-garden because they wanted to teach us the language and communism. So I mean, as little as I was, that they already started, they were making plans to stay there for good. So those are the memories I have of that time. And we did not hear anything from my father for a whole year. But after a year, they allowed him to contact us. So we had a few exchange, like two exchange, I think, of letters where he told us that he was in Siberia. He was working in a place where they made him a sort of medical officer because they were all people that they threw out of Poland. So they just needed somebody called the medical officer, and he had some medical knowledge. So that's what he was made. At least that meant that his work was not that harsh as it could be outside. So, so we knew that much, and uh, we understood that very soon afterwards that the Germans were going to take the whole of Poland. And one night the Russians just disappeared, and they moved in. I mean, they decided that the Germans were coming in, so we went back home. My mother settled us back in, and we waited for the Germans. When the Germans came, that started real problems for Jews. And then, I mean, we are not observant, but then we really found out what it is to be Jewish. We were given different rations. We were not allowed to go to parks, no school for Jewish children. Everybody had to be working for the Germans. And of course, we had the Jewish star, which we had to wear on every piece of clothing, and the Jewish star on our houses so that they could find us very easily. Everybody was very cooperative. Everybody wanted to just do the best they could, so that hoping for the best. And as I said, they all tried everything to do the best they could. They started organizing things, and one of the things that they organized was groups of young people that would take out into the field for jobs in the farms there, and then they would have them wait for them in the central what do you call it, in the middle of the town, and then they would take them over with them, and then they would escort them back at the end of the evening. And we sort of got used to a few of these. They brought them back. And then they said there was a very big job to be done, and they needed as many people as they could. And as I said, everybody was so cooperative that everybody, tried to come. So there would be a very big group of people, 600 plus, this gathered there, and they walked them up the road. There was an old military camp there, and they said that they were going to be binding young trees for the winter. The winter was very harsh, so they had some burlap, and they said they would bind the young trees so they wouldn't die in the winter. And a lot of people just kind of joined in, just wanted to help. And as usual, we waited for them to come back, and nobody was coming back. And nobody knew what was happening. Everybody got a little nervous. They really couldn't figure out what was going on. And in the end, darkness came down, and still no sign. And sometime during the night, one man managed to get himself back. And my mother told me that what he told them, that what happened was that they had open graves there, and with sticks over, and they were told to undress, and they were told to lie on those sticks, and they were shot, and they would drop in. That's what was happening, and that's what happened to everybody. This man was one of the last ones, so he was on top. And when the Germans left, didn't care much, so they didn't kind of cover it very well. And he managed to drag himself out and came back and told the story. So of course there was panic, and we understood then that we were in real trouble, and those people were gone. Then they also decided that what was left of Jewish community there was very little because it was a small town. So they decided to throw the rest of the Jewish community out and to the same place we were during the Russian occupation. It so happened. And so again, my mother packed us up and we moved out there and settled in. And the first thing everybody was doing was looking, hiding places, because we knew that's what was coming, that they were going to demand a group of people for whatever reason, but we already knew why. And I didn't have to be very old to understand that. So, and my mother said to me, look, she said, there's really nowhere to run. And we're really in trouble. Yeah, everybody's trying to find a way to escape and there is none. And sure enough, there comes a demand for a group of people that want supposedly for work in Germany. And everybody hides, tried to hide. My mother, because we had been there before, knew a couple of farmers, and she decided to split us up. She put me with one farmer, and she, with my sister, went to another farmer. And she paid in advance to keep her the whole day until the Germans left. Meaning that after they found the number of people that they needed to put on the train. So all day long, I was absolutely in a terrible state, waiting and not knowing what happened to my mother and my sister. And my mother had the same situation. She was worried about me. Towards the evening, when they finally got the right number, having found enough people, they loaded them on the train, and my mother came back to get me. And she said that we were never going to split up again. Because she said, no matter what happens, we're all going together. And that was her promise. And because she said she thought all day that I was caught. So she said that whatever happens, we need to stay together. And that was the decision. And again, people were trying to find ways to run, to go, but there was nothing. And then she also told me that when actually the way she survived was also a miracle, because when she was about halfway through the day, the woman got scared and threw her out, simply on outside into the garden. And she said that she crouched with my sister in a little bush all day long until they stopped looking. But she said there were airplanes running around and there were people looking, and they somehow by miracle didn't see her. So she understood exactly what was happening. And she told me, because my sister was too young, but I understood. But that we had some very good friends, and everybody, as I said, was looking for a way out. But they came to my mother, and they were men. And as you know, Jewish men can be checked if they are Jewish, and the ladies cannot. So they said to my mother, look, you don't look Jewish, you don't speak Yiddish. Perhaps you could pass as Catholic. And they helped her go to a priest, and they bought some paper. I think she flashed one of them. It was the ID. So each one of us had a new ID, had a new name, new grandparents, new birthplace. Everything was new. And she sat me down and she taught me all this. And she said that we were going to pack up and we were going to leave. This was this camp was not locked. That was not locked. you could leave and then come back. Some people did, but they they helped her actually on a train, and they decided that we were going to a place called Yaroslavl, which was supposed to be Juden free, but no Jews. But that's where so that my mother was going to try to go with the two of us. And we were loaded on the train. Well, we were helped on the train, and we had little luggage. And my mother, of course, was carrying my sister and me. I was by hand, and we settled in the train and said goodbye to our friends, unfortunately, who did not survive. And as we started to ride, there was some people were talking to each other and kind of being friendly, and some guy started chatting with my mother, and I wasn't paying much attention. But then on a quiet moment when he wasn't there, she told me quietly that he was actually a Volksdeutsch, meaning he was partially German. And of course, they were even more obliged to find Jews and give them up. And he started pushing her, asking her questions who we were. He's figured out that we weren't who we said we were. And my mother said that unfortunately she had no defense, and she admitted that actually we were Jewish. At which point he said, well, I am also going to Yaroslavl, so I'm going to accompany you. And when we get to Yaroslavl, I'm going to hand you over to Gestapo. We knew what that meant as well. And that's how we traveled, 4 days and 4 nights. And he was very careful not to, he was afraid that maybe I could run away or something. And of course I wasn't, but he was being careful because he wanted all 3 of us to be taken and given away. And finally, as I said, she explained to me that she made a deal with him because she said she knew that they're going to separate us. The children did not survive. They may want to keep her for work. She didn't want to survive without children. So she made a deal with him that he would ask them. She gave him everything we had, tickets for the luggage and money, whatever she had. But she asked him for one thing, for one favor, if you can call it a favor, that when we get to Gestapo, that have us shot, all 3 of us quickly, immediately, and all 3 of us, because she didn't want us to be torn away and be separated. So I don't believe it would ever happen, but anyway, that's what she told me, and that's how we traveled. Well, finally we arrived in Yaroslavl, and as we're coming down the platform, I suddenly realized this is it, and I stopped pulling at her, and I said, "Mom, I don't want to die." She looked at me. And she said to him, "Look, why don't you let her go? She's blonde and green-eyed. Maybe she can survive." And I said, "No, I'm not going without you." So, I didn't even wait for the reply that I said, "No, I'm staying with you." So we started walking towards Gestapo. And then my mother, she usually never gave up, said to him this, "Look, I gave you everything I have. Keep it. Keep it there. Why don't you just let us go and try our luck?" And and then she added, "Why do you want us on your conscience?" And she knew he had children, so maybe that was something that was part of the reason that he did what he did. He suddenly stopped, and he turned around and he said, I don't know if anybody understands Polish. It's difficult to explain, but I will try to. Z deszczu pod rynne, meaning from rain to under and to under. You mean from bad to worse for us, if that's what we're going to do. But he gave her a few zlotys back even, and just turned around and took everything else and left. And there we were, the three of us, my mother holding my sister and me by the hand in the middle of a strange town and you know, looking around, where do we go now? No money, just the three of us. And she spied a cafe there. So we walked into a little cafe and with a few dollars, that's lotus, that she had, she ordered a little milk for my sister. And she started asking the customers there if there were any people who knew of places where we could find lodgings. We needed to be inside. And one man got up and said, oh yeah, I know, there's a lady there, a washer lady who takes lodgers, and I'll take you there. And she did. She walked us over there. And my mother said to her, I don't have any money, but I will go tomorrow to work, and whatever I earn, I will bring and give you for keeping us. And she looked at us and she said, okay. And then her son suddenly appeared and said, Mom, don't take her. And she said, oh no, she said, this is a mother and two children. I have to take her. And she did. She took us in, she gave us a bed, which was fine because it was warm, the three of us. I was at the feet, and immediately my mother went the next day and found some, like a lady's help, just little jobs. And she started doing that every day, and she was bringing a little money and for keeping us. And we started sort of living there. And I went to school. I had to go to school at that age. Even then, uh, not Jews, but non-Jews had to go to school. So I had the job of not giving myself away who I was. And what saved me actually was that in the curriculum, of course, there was religion, there were Catholics. So there was this book that the priest gave everybody. It's something called the Catechism, which had questions and answers, all to do with the religion. Since I knew how to read, I just swallowed that book because that gave me a little information, a little bit something, because I had no knowledge whatsoever. All I knew was that I had to cross myself going in and out of church. That's all I knew. So slowly, I kind of learned a little bit here, a little bit there. And on Sunday, of course, I had to go to church. We all had to go to church. She was a religious lady. And I think she was mainly uh, concentrated on me because I think my sister was too young. My mother was not that young. And I was, the one that I think she really was a very religious person and really wanted to make sure that I would go to heaven and I would work, be a good Catholic. And I understood that, and I went along with everything that she told me to do. We had the Christmas trees, and we went to church on Sundays, and slowly, the life, just went along. My mother was very concerned about a couple of things. My sister, first of all, was very sickly. There is a name for what she had, but she was very sick, and the lady really was really nice. She looked after her because I was in school, and my mother was working, so my sister was at home, and she took care of her. And my mother was worried about the security. Our papers, we didn't know if our papers were good or not. I gave them to the Holocaust Museum, and I still don't know if they were good or not. There were no computers, so it wasn't easy to just check. But anyway, that was her worry. Her worry was also my sister had very curly hair. The Polish girls have straight blonde hair and not curls. I had wavy hair, and so they made plaits with mine. And what she used to do with my sister a couple of times because she was so worried because she was playing in the street. She just shaved her completely. She claimed it was to make her hair thicker. So that was her excuse. I mean, this was my mother went for all the details. And because she was always worried that the Polish people can, recognize Jews a little bit easier than most, she decided that maybe we would be better off if we went to Germany. And they had an open sort of a place where you could sign up for work in Germany. And so, and she said to me that it was safer for Jews to be in Germany than in Poland because the Germans would not really be as quick to recognize us as the Poles. And it would have been okay, except that they would have accepted me and her, but they wouldn't take a baby. I mean, my sister was very young. So that didn't work out. So then she decided, that was my mother again. She decided that she needed to work for some place where she could have an ID that would, because they were asking for papers. You walked on the street, they went around with open guns. They could do anything, the German soldiers. So my mother just walked into the German military camp and asked for a job. And she said to me, I don't know if they will ask for papers, which they did. And again, we sweated it out for as long as they were checking the papers before they gave her the job. But in the end, they gave her the job. And her job was peeling potatoes for the troops. But she had the Ausweis, the ID. And this helped, this, as I said, these things were very helpful if you were got into trouble. So we didn't want to be taken into the Gestapo and checked out, and if we could help it. So she thought that this might be helpful, and it was. The what happened was that the son of the lady who kept us, she had more than one, she had 3 or 4, I think, was doing something very illegal, and he was killing pigs for a living, which was a death penalty. So they were always looking for him. And at one point they came in the middle of the night and they roused everybody out, and they got us all into the streets at the middle of the night. And they were checking everybody. They were looking for him, but at the same time, they were checking everybody, and they were going to take everybody to the Gestapo to be checked out. And my mother showed them the Ausweis. And when they saw that, they said, oh no, you stay. So the only Jews in the house, we stayed. And the rest were taken into the Gestapo. And the next morning they came, they were checked out. They checked out, so they were brought in and they were fine. But as I said, for us not to go to the Gestapo was really, really a relief. Now, we had during this time, I know my mother must have written to the people that we left behind because she had a couple of letters from there. And one of those letters brought us very important information. It was very dangerous, she told me that, but it was just some things that she felt she had to do, keep in touch. And what the letter gave us, the information was really the most important. There was a letter from my father through the Red Cross that he was safe with his sister in Palestine. We knew there was a family in Palestine, but we didn't know much about it. It's just that we knew there was family there. But we understood that way that my father was not a prisoner anymore in Russia, that he was out and that he was free. And that's all we knew. And we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't contact him because we were under the German occupation. So obviously we wouldn't write. But we had that information, and that really saved us and helped us in the end. In the meantime, we just continued, and we had no knowledge of what was going in the front. no papers, no BBC, that was death penalty. So we didn't know what was going on. And then one morning, we woke up and suddenly there was a complete silence in the street. And my mother was trying to decide whether she should go to work or not, because usually there were, it was a farmer's place. So there were horse and carts going back and forth all very from 4 o'clock in the morning. We were on the main street. So I was standing by the window and looking out, and there was nothing. It was a complete loud silence. And suddenly there was a tremendous bang. And I started screaming, my hand, because my left hand was hurting, it was bleeding. I was by the window and my hand was on the railing there, and the shrapnel hit my hand. And my mother grabbed my sister and grabbed me by the hand, and we walked out into the street, and there was not a soul in the street. We walked to the hospital, and when we got there, they told us that the Germans were leaving and the Russians were coming to save us, quote unquote. Um, and because my mother knew Russians. They cleaned me up, and unfortunately I lost a couple of fingers, but they said that they will save my hand, hopefully, because they look after it. But what will happen? Oh, that's the house that we were living in, yes, and that was before the bomb. As I was saying, uh, they said the only thing was, the most important thing was that I shouldn't get an infection. And if I get an infection, they might have to amputate my hand altogether. So can imagine my mother. So my mother stayed all night at the hospital with me, with my sister. The next morning, she went back to see the house, and apparently it was shambles. And she said you couldn't live there. And in addition to that, in the kitchen, the roof fell down, and the lady who took us in was killed. So they did not know that the night before. The neighbor took her. That house that was just shown had 3 separate places. We were in the middle one, yes, and then we were then taken by the neighbor on the right. She took us in, and she kept my mother and sister. My mother started knitting and doing whatever she could to earn a little money, because she wanted to look for my father, and she would come and visit me, of course. It took, I don't know how long, but she started writing. She said that she thought that there was most likely that my father, if he was in Palestine, that he was with his sister, and maybe it was Tel Aviv. She thought that was most likely, and she wrote. There were all people, everybody was looking for people by then, and the Russians took their time to get in, but eventually they did. There was a lot of bombing, and there was a lot of people that were in the hospital. I don't know where they got wounded, but there were very many people wounded. And I remember that people at night would get out of the hospital. If they could stand, they would leave the bed and go out, because they were afraid that they would bomb the hospital, which they never did. Anyway, she did guess correctly. And not only that, the lady who got this information about Olga, Halina, Eva, knew my father personally. So she just phoned him and told him that we were alive. And then my father took over, and we learned, oh, that was that was during the Russian occupation. You see those hats? That was my mother's. Yes, and of course I went to communion. Yes, and that we had Christmas, as I mentioned, and this was the house. Yes, yeah. Are we back? Okay. So my father, we thought my father would come and get us to get us out. The Russians did not allow anybody out. The Poles were not allowed to leave the country. But they did make some kind of semi-official act that allowed the Jews to come out. And but my father didn't come himself. He was terrified of the Russians, but he sent my cousin Arya, who was, now you will understand that, he was in a British uniform, but he was in Haganah. Do you know about that? That they were all put into the army, but they were all also the Haganah, because they were trying to get rid of the British. But because he had the uniform, it was easy for him to move around Europe at that point. So he came and he told us that he needed us to move to near Krakow, because that's where the Jewish agency was, and we needed to find a place there. There was no place there, so we had to be near Krakow. And I remember that they asked us, my mother told me this, they asked, are you Polish? Meaning, are you Jewish or Polish? And so my mother said I had no choice. She said I was Polish, because we had nowhere to live. So we, in order to get a room, you had to lie still. And in the meantime, in the agency, they were preparing, they had groups of people leaving. There was a sort of a system. They had a house where they housed us. It was like a common house. You know, we had groups of people living near the border. They had to get us over the border into Germany. So we were near the border, and then they attacked us. The Poles attacked us. Also, in the beginning, when we joined the group of the people coming out, they didn't believe us that we were Jewish. Now, that was the other side of the matter. We had no papers. We don't look Jewish. With no man with us. So my mother kept saying, oh, my husband's name was Isaac. It was no good. But then somebody remembered my mother's name, Schreiber, Olga Schreiber, being the champion swimmer of Poland. So they accepted us. And then they had this big house with various groups of people there. And one night, the militia found themselves attacking us. We stood there and screamed about 2 hours, I think. And they did leave us because they came to rape and rob us. We knew that. It was a nice goodbye. As I said, they did not get in. And the next morning, so one group after another, we had trucks. And the first one, people who were pregnant, pregnant ladies, small children. Eventually, it was our turn. And we went, they just threw us over the border. At the border again, there was a Russian and a Polish guard. And you had to have vodka and what was the other one? The other vodka and whiskey, maybe. Anyway, you had to have one for each. They knew who wanted what, but even that wasn't enough. So one of them, the Russian, wanted chassis to watch, and nobody moved in the so my mother took off her, and once she took her off, then the others did too. We already had then the leader from the Jewish agency to lead us out there. So he went to get the tickets. So we were supposed to take a train to Berlin, and they wouldn't sell them the tickets. Why? Because we were Jewish. That was after the war, after they lost the war. So they didn't give up easily. Somehow he got the tickets, and we did get delivered to Berlin. Oh, what a joy that was, white bread, cheese. We hadn't seen that forever. So we were very, very sort of excited about all this. And eventually we managed to get after we were in Berlin and the French part, then the British part, I think we ended up in the American part. I don't know why they kept moving us. But then we were told that we were going to go to Italy. There were 2 camps in Italy near Bari. And we went to one of them, and then we learned more about my father, finally having him join us. He apparently, when he was let out of Russia, it was because there was a Yalta conference where Stalin and Roosevelt and Churchill met. The war was not going very well, so they needed boots on the ground, more people. And Stalin decided that he would let all these prisoners who were not obviously criminals. And so they let them out. My father came out, my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin. My uncle died on the way, but the other, my aunt and cousin came, and we all had the choice of going either to England or to Palestine. My parents chose England, and he asked that we stay in Italy as long as possible before they ship us off to England. So of course they did the opposite, and we were on the ship before we knew it. Strangely enough, I don't remember the trip actually. I remember the next thing I remember is the White Cliffs of Dover. I don't know whether you're familiar with that, but you have the old lady here, you know, when you get to New York, and the English have the White Cliffs of Dover. They've got songs about it, and it's very pretty there. However, the weather is very, very bad. The weather is always rainy and cloudy, and we were put on the train. We were fed, and you know, they were pretty nice to us. No complaints. But you know, the view of the little towns we went through, because they decided to put us near Liverpool, which is north of England. And as we were traveling on this train, I remember this weather was horrible, and the rows of houses, you know, no grass, no gardens. It was just very, very depressing. When we got to finally near Liverpool, there was a camp. It was like a soldiers' camp, and we were just told to. We got a bigger bunker because we need 3 beds and 3 people, so we were settled in. My father had to go back to rejoin his unit, and he said he would, you know, have to try to get back as soon as possible. In the meantime, we had a very pleasant time there. We had the rations were small, but they were all the same. I mean, they gave us the same as the British. You know, we had coupons for clothes, and they really they served the English tea today. They wouldn't look at it, but then sort of a big bowl. So terrible.
Well, thank you, Halina. That's thank you for sharing your journey of the, you know, your story about the Holocaust and arriving to England and connecting with your father. Thank you for sharing your story. That's really really important story. So thank you. Thank you. Do you want? I just wanted to say that your story was very unique in that you know, you were almost like hidden in plain sight because you were meant to grow up as a Catholic, and you went to communion and all that stuff. So yeah, so that was very interesting. So thank you very much. And and if we have any questions, you know, you can put your questions in the chat for Halina, and also when we finish our commemorative program, we will also take, Halina will also take questions. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Halina. So So we will begin our commemorative ceremony now with a responsive reading of We Remember Them. And we're going to have the responsive readings will be led by Eliana Sandler, who is a granddaughter of a very own Bechamel member, my mother, Sheila Bernard, Alev Shalom. So, please join Eliana. And Eliana, would you please go ahead and lead us? You have to unmute yourself.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we remember them. At the rising of the sun and as it's going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. For as long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
Thank you, Eliana. So we now begin with the legacy readings, which will be led by 4 generations of Holocaust survivor, Bechamel member, Bubby, Lisa Murek's family. Lisa will be followed by her daughter, Barbara Chessman, to read the Pledge of Acceptance, and then followed by Lisa's grandchildren and great-grandchildren to read the continuation. Lisa herself was born in 1925 in Ostrog, Poland, which is now Ukraine. And in 1941, the Nazis took over, and Lisa and her family were forced to live in a ghetto and worked as slave laborers for the Germans until they went into hiding, first in a barn and later in a potato cellar. And that was between 1942 and 1944, when the Russians came and liberated them. They were able to come out of hiding. So we ask all the Holocaust survivors who are online now to join Lisa in the legacy reading. So Lisa, please go ahead.
We take this oath. We take it in the shadows of flames, whose tongues scar the soul of our people. We vow with our sadness hidden, our faith renewed. We vow we shall never let the sacred memory of our perished 6 million brethren be forgotten or erased. We saw them hungry. In fear we saw them at the thresholds of death, true to their faith. We received their silence in silence. We merged their tears with ours. We are the remaining witnesses of deportations, executions, mass graves, death camps, mute prayers, and cries of revolt. The young, the old, the rich, and the poor, the ghetto fighters, the partisans, the scholars, and the messianic dreamers, the tradesmen and businessmen, the Hasidim and the Misnagim. Like a cloud, we saw them vanish. We take this oath. Zachor, remember what the Nazi murderers and their accomplices did to our Jewish people. Remember them with rage and contempt. Remember what an indifferent world did to us and to itself. We must also remember the good deeds of the righteous Gentiles. In their memory, we extend our hands and hearts to all Jews and vow to fight anti-Semitism wherever it exists. We take this oath. Our memory will become words, words of history of the Holocaust to be handed down from generation to generation, midor lidor. Unsere Kedoshim mir wollen euch keinmal nicht vergessen.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and all the survivors that read that as well. And now we ask all the second generation, the children of Holocaust survivors, to join in the second generation reading the Pledge of Acceptance. Anyone else who is the second generation, please unmute yourself and read along with Barbara.
We who are your sons and daughters belong to a generation
in which
every attempt was
They
made
made for us to never exist.
exist.
we
who represent your victory
victory
and
and
your
your
triumph over evil
and unthinkable
actions.
responsibility to preserve and protect the legacy of the Holocaust.
Legacy of the Holocaust.
We pledge
To commemorate, pledge to educate,
We pledge
to forever remember.
We
We
pledge
pledge to you,
mothers
our
and
mothers and fathers, suffered in ways
words
which
cannot
words
describe.
cannot describe.
That our commitment
and
and
everlasting commitment
to
for
this
this generation and for every generation to come.
We
We dedicate this pledge to our beloved grandmothers and beloved grandmothers,
mothers and
to the grandfathers
to
who
see us.
never dedicate this pledge to our aunts.
We dedicate this pledge to our aunts,
Brothers and
uncles,
sisters,
brothers and sisters who are forever missing from our lives. We dedicate this pledge to all the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were so brutally murdered, but who will always be in our thoughts and in our hearts.
In their
memory,
We extend our hands and hearts to all Jews
and vow to fight anti-Semitism wherever it exists.
wherever it exists.
Thank you, Barbara, for leading that and for all the second generation. And now we ask all the third generation, the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, to join in as Lisa's grandchildren and great-grandchildren will lead us in the Pledge of Continuation. So all third and fourth generation, please unmute yourselves and read the Pledge of Continuation.
Kazakh hacked the John Doe Robots account.
We who are your grandchildren
will
carry the
survivors'
survivors' legacy to prove
to
ourselves and to others that we
that
can carry our victory, as well as to memorize
those
those loved ones who
perished
perished in the Holocaust. We
We
pledge
pledge
to
to
always
always remember
remember who we are, where we came from, and also the traumas of our grandparents endured and survived. Educate people of other ethnic, religious, and cultural groups about our grandparents' experiences. Commit to use lessons of the Holocaust to support justice, tolerance, peace, kindness, and compassion. accept
survivors'
survivors'
memories,
memories, and to pass them on to future generations. In their
In their
memory,
memory, we
we
extend our
extend our hands and
and heart
hearts
to all
to all
Jews
Jews and
and
vow
vow
to fight
anti-Semitism
anti-Semitism wherever it exists.
Thank you so much. That was really meaningful, very, very meaningful. Now we're going to observe a minute of silence in solemn reflection, as they do in Israel when Shoah air raid siren sounds throughout the country.
Okay.
Okay. We will now have Cantor Nadell. Cantor Nadell, you on with us?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so he will now lead us in the memorial prayer of Malay Rachamim.
שוכן במרומים המתים מלוכנך אצל כנפי השכינה מעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר ורקיע נראים ומזהירים שש מיליוני יהודים חללי השואה שנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו חיים על קידוש השם על ידי המרצחים הנאצים ועוזריהם יימח שמם וזכרם בעבור שענפים מתפללים לעילוי נשמותיהם בגן עדן من خسام رخين بال الرخمي يستيرين بسي سرك نفض ليلومي بيترو رهايم سيني شموسيم أدوناي ونخلصهم أرت علت خسيدهم بيانه بشلم المشكي حسين
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hassan Nadel. We're very honored that you could do that for us. And we're very honored that you would also do some more singing afterwards. Right now, we're going to have Rabbi Antine and Holocaust survivor Albert Guri lead us in the Holocaust Kaddish. And Albert Guri is also a Beth member who survived the Holocaust. And he was originally from Paris, France, and he will name the towns and the camps of the Holocaust. So please welcome Rabbi Antine and Albert Guri.
Thank you, Nira, and thank you for really planning and presenting this program so beautifully. And also thank you to Halina for sharing your really, really moving story. So grateful for you to do that this evening on Yom Hashoah. Okay, we'll recite the Kaddish. I'll say the Hebrew, and then Albert will do the names of the cities. Al Hakol.
Auschwitz, Birkenau, Boone, Baranovska, Belsen.
Yitgadal.
Belzec, Bialystok, Babi Yar.
Yitkadash.
Mochini, Bogdavovka, Buchenwald.
V'yishtabach.
Chemno, Krakow, Dachau.
V'yitba'ar.
Dakova, Danica, Dora.
V'yitromam.
Dumanovka, Ebensee, Dineti, Flossenburg.
V'yitnasei.
Großrosen, Gunskirchen, Gurs.
Shemo.
Herzogensburg, Lazi, Yadovno, Kaiserwald.
Shalmelech.
Kamenets, Podolsk, Kishinev, Kovno, Kloga.
Malchei Hamlachim.
Lodz, Lublin, Lubin, Lov, Lyon.
Hakadosh Baruch Hu.
Beidanek, Mauthausen, Minsk, Natzweiler, Neugeim.
Be'olamot Shabara.
Ordruf, Blaszov, Papenburg, Ponary.
Ha'olam Hazeh.
Prague, Radom, Ravensbrück, Remsdorf, Riga.
V'ha'olam Haba.
Sachsenburg, Sachsenhausen, Saint-Saba, Shaliau,
Kirtsono,
Skarzisko, Kamena, Sobibor, Studov,
Uchirtson Yareyav,
Theresienstadt, Transnistria, Treblinka, Vilna,
Uchirtson Kol Beis Yisrael,
Viavara, Warsaw, Zimun, Zitomir, and the scores of other camps.
Oseh Shalom Bimramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much, Aber and Rabbi and team. And now we're going to sing the partisan song, Zognit Kimol, which will be led by Cantor Nadel. This song is considered the main Yiddish anthem of the Holocaust, and the lyrics were written in 1943 by Hirsch Glick in Vilna, and it was sung in the ghettos and by the Jewish resistance fighters. And later it was taken up by all Holocaust survivors and sung at all Holocaust memorials all over the world. So we find it's only appropriate for us to sing it as well. So please, everyone, you can join in with Cantor Nadel and sing it loud and proud. Thank you, Cantor.
Komm in Welt noch unser Reis gewinnt schon. Sveta Point und unser Trockner sein da. Komm in Welt noch unser Reis gewinnt schon. Sveta Point und unser Trockner sein da. Anatomar hineder Kiachrona. היום הסתירו שמי העננה, זה יום ספורות יעדי יבוא, מצעדינו עוד ימים ננפו, זה יום ספורות יעדי יבוא, ומצעדינו עוד ימים אנחנו פה.
Thank you so much. That was done beautifully. And now we will end our ceremony, as we always do, with Hatikva, the hope. And again, Cantor Nadel will lead us with that, and everyone may join in as well. So, so please go ahead, and we always like to end with Hatikva, the hope.
Nefesh Yehudi, Ohomia, Ufaten Mizach Kadima, Ein Lezion, Sovia, Yotam Hoshi Zion
Thank you so much, Cantor Nadel, for sharing your beautiful voice and really honoring us with your singing. And we thank everyone here tonight for participating, and especially our keynote speaker, Holocaust survivor, Halina Peabody, who will stay for questions and answers right now. If you'd like to pose any questions for her, you can put them in the chat, or you can speak up as you please. But I just wanted to say, anybody that wanted to leave, I wanted to thank you all so much for participating in this really meaningful Erev Yom HaShoah, and just really keeping it in your hearts, all the 6 million Jews that were murdered, and really just honoring them in this way. So thank you all so much.
I am very moved by your prayers, and I've not attended any of them, so this was very nice for me too.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you, Halina. And let me see if we have any questions. If anybody has a question, feel free to either put in the chat, or if you want to ask her right now, you can unmute yourself. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, I see a lot of thank yous to Halina for for sharing your incredible story. Anybody else? Do I hear a question?
Yes. How on earth did you remember all this in such detail when you were so young?
Well, it's really when you're young and you know about death, when you know that any moment this might be the end, no matter how young you are, first of all, you're very alert. You learn to grow up quite fast. And my mother really shared all this with me. And I wasn't that young, when you're 8, 9, 10, you begin to be quite grown up. And as I said, it was difficult for me when my father came and joined us, because I was her partner, and then I became the babysitter, my sister. But no, I do remember a lot. I do remember everything, because I was so scared. I so didn't want to die.
Halina, how long did you stay in England?
I was in England, let's see, from when we get there, many years. Since I can't remember how many, but I was there until 1957 when I went to the second Maccabeah games with my table tennis and stayed. And then after that, we came to the States. I've lived a long, long time, so I'm going to be 90 in December.
Mazal Tov. How long did you stay in Israel?
Well, in Israel, I stayed from the second Maccabeah 57 to about 72. But I never really left Israel. Israel immediately felt like home. And I have a group of my friends here all say the same thing. Why didn't we stay?
Yeah, welcome to the club.
Yes.
Nice to see you, Halina. Very nice.
See you too. I recognize you too.
I know.
Nice to see you, Marta, as well. And Halina, I wanted to see if you wanted to share your story about how you became a table tennis champion and represented England to the Maccabeah games.
Well,
immediately after the Holocaust.
Well, it wasn't immediate, no.
Yeah.
When I got to England, it was very hard, you didn't have social workers, you didn't have anybody to help you cope with the new language, knew everything. And table tennis, I wanted tennis, but there were no facilities. So table tennis was the next best thing. It was a club Maccabi. And immediately, I have friends, they're young people. And we started playing. We started playing every night. I worked during the day and I played table tennis in the evening. And so, we had the boys were so much better than the girls, as you know. So they taught us. And then in 1953, I was very honored that they said they would like me to represent England in Israel. In 1953, that was. And of course, I was very happy. I met my family there, I had friends there, a couple of lady girls that were also settled there after the war. We went to England, they went to Palestine but then it became Israel. So table tennis, I still have a table, but I don't have anybody to play with.
I'll come over and play with you. I love it.
Please do.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else have a question for Halina? Anybody? I know we've got a lot of messages for you that thanking you. It says, Halina, thanks very much for a meaningful story. And everybody is just very, very grateful that you took the time tonight to share it with us. So thank you very much. And I thank all of our participants, and I thank Rabbi Cooper for assisting and doing so much, and Rabbi Antine for always supporting us and also participating and assisting and doing all the hard work, and all the participants, and to all the Holocaust survivors who were on this Zoom program tonight. It really is very meaningful to me. So I thank you very much, and I thank you all for being here, and all the best to everyone. Thank you.
I thank you for having me. I really and truly feel grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Halina. And just stay healthy, and we want to celebrate your 100th birthday coming up. 10 years.
Wait, you have to wait 11 years.
Okay, we will do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.